Hello everyone, Leaf Reed here, and I've returned with a brand new camera after my last one died. So it's been a little bit since I've uploaded, so I just read something that I was kind of figuring out what do I start with on my new camera, and I just read something that's very short and very, very interesting. And what it is, I'm not sure what you actually call this is, but I would call it Project Gateway. This is very much a departure from a typical book. This is essentially a CIA government document that has been legally released. And what it talks about is essentially metaphysics and ESP, and I was watching a bunch of spirituality channels on consciousness and whatever, and this came up as like this big, YouTuber, oh my God, guys, like the big document is leaked. And I thought, well, instead of having someone tell me about it, I just went ahead and read it, and it's very, very interesting. And there's a lot of spiritual and enlightenment documents and texts you can find online or throughout history, and there's a lot of very conspiracy theory, super believable ESP and you're so special kind of content. But what I think makes this most compelling is the fact that this is a actual government CIA document that a bunch of guys sat down, looked at ESP and meditation, whatever, and using Western scientific methods, applying it to these traditions and these esoteric practices, and one, comprehending it in a scientific format, and two, approaching it with a purely practical and skeptical mind frame. So it's very much a, I'm not sure if Descartes did this, but basically anything you can trust stays on the table, something that for real. So there's no, like hype, there's no spiritual cheerleader team on this paper to telling you that you are special and you have the secrets of the universe, which you might actually do, but these guys looked at it and as a practical thing, how do we beat the Soviets? How do we, encode information? How do we do it? What are the practical effects of transcendental meditation and all that stuff? So this really is a breakdown of the practical and realistic aspects of all that's kind of spirituality. So very interesting stuff that I read, and my mind is just buzzing with ideas right now. And this was originally written 1983. It deals with experiments. I'm not sure if it's funded directly, but at the Monroe Institute by Bob Monroe, who did a lot of this kind of testing, where he had students try to astral project themselves across the country into a university and read numbers on a computer monitor, which they all could get some of the numbers, but not all of them. So there's a lot of caveats and a lot of interesting things, but let's just dive into this because it really is one of the most interesting things I've read. And it's something that I feel is more trustworthy than other spiritual stuff out there. Right, so it's called the Gateway Experience. And so it's funny because it brings up the three main aspects of it, which are hypnosis, biofeedback, and transcendental meditation. It's funny because transcendental meditation is something that was promoted or shilled by a bunch of celebrities in the 90s, including people like David Lynch, Jerry Springer, who's that other guy? I forget his name, but there were quite a lot of actors who were showing this thing. And what it was like a retreat where you get a special guy and he teaches you, you know, all these special meditations, and they say, oh, I have so much energy now, even though I'm in my 50s and blah, blah, blah. And really transcendental meditation is not something hard to teach. There's been a lot of videos about this. It's basically, the transcendental part is that you're just meditating using a mantra. And the big reveal is that the mantra can be a phrase that's not just Om or a syllable or whatever. It could be something that you make up. But it's a very, you know, cliquey kind of thing that they tried to market after, I guess, this kind of research was done and marketed towards very wealthy and slightly stupid Hollywood types. But yeah. And so biofeedback, what's that? It's things where like, if you say your right leg is numb, you can make it feel numb. By using your mind, you can affect your body. It's just very basic stuff. You know, if you say for a body part to be numb or to be tingly or whatever, in the same way that you think you've been bitten by a bug or something, you can create that paranoia in your mind will create the effect on your body. Kind of similar to shingles in a way, actually, because shingles is activated by stress, I believe, which is just, I don't know, crazy that your mind has that much power over your body. And that's what I thought at the time when I was learning about shingles, because my brother got it. But yeah, no, it's a real thing, and they're kind of diving into it here, and they're saying, yeah, you can also, there's a part in here where it talks about, you know, using the body or that mechanism to heal diseases. And of course, there are people who have, outside of this paper, claim that you can heal cancer using your mind. And I'm sure there's some truth to that. I don't think it's a 100% guaranteed process. But I think that something like that is possible. Maybe not, you know, if it's an extreme state of cancer, then probably not. But I'm sure, like, if you have a cold, if you have a general, you know, disorder or something, you can probably like mentally work your way through it, or make yourself feel better. I mean, it wouldn't be that way if placebo wasn't a thing. If you feel that you are better, you will become better. And it goes more into that. Because it's near the end and I just read it. It's called color breathing or color theory. And I guess this is similar to like Reiki healing, where you have the energy waves on the body. And again, it's a weird part where, you know, there's like a pseudoscience where, you know, there's no basis for this thing to be believed or 100% accurate, but there are methods and technologies that, like, there's a reason why these things have been around for centuries, is that they do work in some capacity, and it's not always just placebo. I think there are people who do know what they're doing with energy healing and stuff. I know a few of them. And there's also things where, like, people do healing with magnets. The Soviets had a lot of weird experiments, something about like very high pressure showers, Ganzfeld experiments where you put 2 ping pong balls over your eyeballs in a low light room or a red room. There's a bunch of weird stuff out there, and some of it is kind of legit. But in the sense of color breathing, what it was saying is that as you breathe, you also envision colors. And so, for example, if you have a bruise on your body, you project the color blue onto that bruise to make the swelling go down. And it says vice versa, if you envision red and yellow, that'll make the swelling or the bleeding worse. As an example, it gives a very brief example of that, of what that means, color breathing. A lot of the terms in this paper also revolve around left and right hemispheres of the brain. I think that's an outdated concept, but I still think it's relevant in the sense that, you know, your right brain and your left brain aren't, you know, always, you know, wired on a physical way, but in a more general hemisphere way. It's kind of like one side of the brain is doing the functions of, let's say, logic and reason on the left side, and then interpretation, symbology, and artistic expression on the right side. But it's taken more as like a general thing rather than a more physical thing, if that makes sense. So it talks about those three introductory things. It says the kind of meditation of the Kundalini style is that basically, yeah, so it gets really interesting. So the Kundalini style is basically you get in a state of meditation where I think the fluids in your spine or something, you can like control that, and you control, you know, when you have your spine perfectly aligned and you're meditating and your head is still, you kind of vibrate up your spine or something, or become very conscious of your spine, and it goes all the way to the base of your neck, and it kind of creates this, you know, Zen state. And it goes on to, I'm not sure if it's part of the same thing, but it talks about hemisphere sync. So this is the main driving point, I would say. The beginning point of this entire process is hemisync, as it's short form for hemisphere sync, which is that in your meditative state, it's kind of like a waking REM sleep state that you want to achieve. I mean, I think that's impossible, but like a waking sleeping state, you know, that's what meditation really is. But the goal of it, apparently, and it gets pretty scientific, is that, you know, your brain has different kind of waves. It has beta waves, theta waves, alpha waves, etc. And they all oscillate at different hertz. So that's, I believe hertz is like the cycles per second. You know, if a 60 hertz monitor is, they know that that's your refresh rate, that it's doing 60 frames per second, basically. That's the whole point of having a 60 hertz monitor, is that you can actually capture that kind of gameplay or footage or whatever. But similarly, in your brain, it's also, I guess, oscillating at a certain wavelength. And so when you meditate and you close your eyes, it actually gets very specific here. I want to get his name. I think his name is Bentov, who's the scientist who did most of the research. He said basically, in the meditative stance, you have the blood going up the aorta from your heart, and there's like a, you know, all the muscles in the body are controlled by, you know, chemical electrical pulses. That's why pacemakers are a thing. And so when you meditate, all of your blood pressure, all of your blood flow, everything begins to slow down. And the signals that travel up the aorta immediately travel down after they're, you know, finished sending blood. It goes like this, basically. And in a normal state of wakefulness, as soon as your signal's coming down, a new one is coming up, and it's just going like this constantly. And in the meditative state, it'll slow down to the point where you become conscious of this rhythm inside of you, basically. And so before this thing can be intercepted, it goes all the way down your body. And it goes up and down, and you basically get into such a calm state that I think it's 7 to 7.5 hertz is the number that your brain and your body is basically operating on. It's a very calm state of being. And it says you kind of vibrate or oscillate at a very specific point. And that's what allows, it says something about the DRAM, or the layer within the brain that cushions the brain. The whole body basically starts to sync up into this rhythm and this beat that is not only in your body, but also around you. And it says it actually vibrates and goes in sync with the ionosphere, I think it said. And so the idea is that hemisync is that your body calms down and goes into a kind of harmony, the general rhythm of the earth, because everything's in motion. And it basically says everything is, you know, everything is movement. The earth is spinning, the earth is moving through the cosmos, and it has a certain rhythm and a beat to it. And so you basically calm down your body, and you calm down your right and your left hemispheres, and you go in sync with the earth. And I guess, and it says, I think because we are electromagnetic pulses basically in our brain, and that resonates with the magnetic force around the earth. And I do remember I saw a documentary about this, that there are magnetic, essentially strips or lines around the earth. And of course, the pyramids of Egypt are in that line. Lots of spiritual places are in those lines. Sometimes there's nothing in those lines, but there are scientific areas over the earth where the magnetism is higher than elsewhere. And I guess, and that also relates to electromagnetism. So this might be easier to do if you're standing on top of the pyramids or sitting on top of the pyramids or something, but maybe I don't think you can do that. So maybe do it outside beside them. Yeah, so they talk about the lamp. Oh yeah, and so the other thing too is that they say the gateway experience is also accompanied with a bunch of tapes and a lot of auditory tapes. I guess these are certain frequencies that you have to, or you're supposed to sync up to get the right hertz level vibrating in your body and in your brain. And the whole point of this procedure is, the main point is that apparently by doing this, you expand your consciousness. And that's kind of the whole other part in this paper, where it says, well, what is consciousness? What are we actually expanding? And it's like, it's very difficult to explain consciousness without using spiritual terms. It's, awakeness or awareness, or it's something that is aware of itself. Ultimately, if you look at animals are aware of their surroundings, but very rarely do they seem aware that they are an animal. They don't have that self-recognition. I think some animals do. Definitely the more intelligent ones, which I think are octopus, dolphins, probably certain cats and dogs, maybe. But there are points where once the observer can observe that they're observing, that's kind of what consciousness is. And so to expand that, I think, in the spiritual realm, was that to observe that you were observing and also being observed. And so the idea that you can observe something that's observing you that can't be seen, or to observe something that no one else observes, that would be considered, I guess, higher consciousness. And they have this metaphor that they talk about versus the lamp versus the laser, which is that on a daily basis, we are a lamp. We are radiating energy and electromagnetic fields, and and it's just going off into the distance in any direction. And the point of this is that this is supposed to turn you into a laser, where you're supposed to have laser focus, and you should be able to do things like either at the more advanced stages, go out of your body into a temporal experience and eventually go somewhere in the world or in the cosmos and observe something and try to remember it. Another example is that you'd put an object in a box, or someone else puts it in, so you don't know what it is, and you have to guess what it is. So that's something you see in movies all the time. They say, is it ace of spades? Is it three of hearts? What is it? What's on the card? And you have to astrally project and guess. So apparently that's possible. Yeah, and it talks very much about the left and right ventricles of the heart and the biology of it. And apparently the gateway tapes, I just searched them on YouTube. Apparently they do exist and they're on YouTube. I haven't listened to them yet, but I'm probably gonna do it right after this just to see what they're like. I'd be very curious. Right, and so then they stop halfway through the paper, and they kind of talk about consciousness and energy, where they need to redefine and reconfigure our perceptions of what is our basic understanding of perception, of being alive, basically. And I mean, I'll just sum it up in basically the quote here, which is that it's more accurate to say that the mind creates the perception of the brain and not the other way around. So it's a very bold statement, which basically says that, that the universe would not exist if we could not perceive it. It's a very strange thing to say, and it does really remind me a lot of the first Hermetic principle, which is a very ancient doctrine, which is basically mind over matter. And that's not just, if you put your mind to something, you can do it. It's no, that literally matter would not exist if the mind was not there. That you would not, that physical things wouldn't align themselves if they were not perceived to do so. It's also that everything, in that classical world, in their spirituality, that if God created anything, God would have to think it into existence. And much like the way that, an inventor looks at an apple falling or a steam engine or whatever, or thinks up a steam engine, or look at Leo da Vinci's notes, somehow they can think of things that no one else thought of. And it just comes from nothing, really. It just comes into their mind. So the mind really does control, the world. The only reason you ever do anything is because you think to do that thing. The reason I'm recording this video is because I thought to do it. It just appeared in my head and I'm manifesting it. So yeah. And so it's basically saying that, and so here it gets into a really interesting part here where, and I've watched talks about this, and I've heard them explained really, really poorly, but now here it makes sense on hologram theory. So hologram theory it basically says that the entire universe is a hologram. It's a reflection, and it's not, I don't want to say it's not real, but it's saying that, I've always seen it as nihilist atheist cope for like, oh wow, there's a lot of coincidences in my seemingly random, totally pointless life. It's almost like there's a creator or something, like it's a video game. Like, yeah. But here what it's saying simulation theory actually is that if our minds actually control the universe, and what the mind is really an energy field. If it's this energy field, the metaphor that is kind of central to this paper is Bentov says, imagine you have a bowl of water and you drop a bunch of pebbles into 3 pebbles into that bowl of water, and you see the ripples and you see the stones falling to the bottom. And imagine then if you were to suddenly freeze that water with the ripples and then take it out and smash that piece of ice. Using one piece of ice, even if it's a small piece, you can reconstruct and almost recreate the rest of the bowl, basically. And he says that's the way we want to think about energies and also quantum mechanics. This is the work by Dennis Gabor, 1947, who was a physicist who explained the underlying principle which we're trying to understand here, which is the purest kind of light available to us is that produced by a laser, which sends out a beam in which all the waves are of one frequency. Like those made by the ideal pebble in a perfect pond, where 2 laser beams touch, they produce an interference pattern of light and dark ripples that can be recorded on a photographic plate. And if one of the beams, instead of coming directly from the laser, is reflected first off an object, such as a human face, The resulting pattern will be very complex indeed, but it can still be recorded. The record will be a hologram of the face. So he's kind of saying that in a way, in the way that we're just energy forms being like, that we're being reflected from somewhere else. And that it's possible that we could just be different versions of other places and other people. And it goes into a little bit more advanced stuff about the basics of quantum mechanics and the basis of quantum communication, which is, I mean, this is all very theoretical, but this is something you'll see in sci-fi movies all the time about, you know, everything from warp drives, but, you know, I mean, warp quantum travel is still, that's not even theoretical. They're still thinking, yeah, that could maybe someday theoretically be theoretical. But what is actually scientifically theoretical that could be done is quantum communications. So not sending entire matter across space and time, but communications. So the underlying principle is that at the subatomic level, you have a quark or a particle that, you know, inhabits multiple superpositions. And what apparently, as I understand it, is that if you were to twist or contort or affect the quark or the subatomic particle, there would be another subatomic particle, potentially light years away, that would instantaneously also react to that manipulation. And so in that sense, if you could make a subatomic particle do a little dance of up, down, or 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, you'd be able to send a message instantaneously. And it's funny because they're kind of coping immediately, saying, oh, well, this immediately invalidates Einstein's theory of relativity, because it just states that, that the speed limit of the universe is the speed of light, that nothing can go faster than light. Otherwise, it would be essentially infinite energy, and it actually wouldn't move in a weird way. And we'll get into that in one sec. But basically, it's funny because I don't. It sounds like coping, like, well, this doesn't actually invalidate Einstein's theory because it's not working in the realm of the atomic world. It's in the subatomic world. Therefore, it's okay, and he's still like totally valid. And we're not saying we're better than Einstein, which they kind of technically saying they are. So I just thought that was funny. But yeah, so it's basically a communication or a reaction that technically is faster than the speed of light. And again, this is all very new, very theoretical. I mean, this is from the 80s, but still going on now, I'm sure. And the scientists that use the word for the particle that can go faster than the speed of light is called a tachyon. And it comes from the Greek word or two Greek words combined or something of light and something else. I'll go look it up later after this because I'm curious. But yeah, tachyon, death grips, yeah, that is the particle that tachyon gonna blowing out through your brain, something like that. So that's what that is. It's a particle that will actually, on the quantum level, go faster than light, because actually that's a good way to think about it, because light is in the physical, in the study of physics, that's the real painful aspect of being a physicist, allegedly, which is that light, because everything in the universe has been divided into matter and basically energy. Something that's physical, something that's non-physical. And if you ask someone, well, what is light? They all go, oh, because light should be energy, but it also acts like a particle because light can bend, light can be refracted. If you look in a swimming pool and things are like whatever, it's because I'm not sure if that's a good example, but light can be reflected off windows, and of course light can be bent and sucked into black holes where the gravity is so big it actually contracts the light. And you think, oh, how is that possible if light isn't physical? And that's the thing, it's not physical. It can be touched and like bent and molded, which is wild, but that's the nature of the universe. It's the nature of, it can be, bounced off objects, it can be targeted, it can be focused, it can be distorted, it can be eaten by black holes, and it's just like, all right, well, that doesn't make any sense, but we're just gonna have to deal with it, I guess. But what does but this is a really cool concept, which I really like, which is because I always talk about, one day we'll have a uniform method of understanding this. And in this paper, it does say, well, it does make sense if you just think of everything as energy matrices. And it's basically a series of grid format of like 3D spaces and 2D spaces colliding, and the brain interpreting 3D energy planes in a 2D sense. I think that's what it says. But anyway, but the general idea is that, if everything is a hologram and reflected energy, then it makes sense how matter is just reflected energy. It's just, it's just energy of a sort, and we're just energy of a sort, and our minds are part of that energy. And so if everything is like a reflection of energy or a reflection of some other, area in the universe, then, then literally it's mind over matter. Literally, we could be able to manipulate reality to some extent, and that's what they're kind of saying here. So their universal theory is that everything is just energy matrices, which is really, really interesting. It also goes a lot into how the left brain needs to be asleep, and then the right brain interprets, or a bunch of other stuff. It's kind of hard to follow, honestly, and I kind of forget most of it. And so the idea also is that, where are we being reflected from? And so then they go into the concept of infinite energy. And this is where things start to get really spiritual. So they kind of talked about, well, what theoretically would happen if there was a source of infinite energy? Given that we're on a matrix of just pure energy, that space and time and light are all just the same underlying substance, what if you had that substance, that energy, in an infinite format? Well, if it's infinite, it can't be finite, which means it can't be in a physical place, and it can't be in a physical time. It would be a timeless, spaceless thing. And therefore, it could not exist in this universe. And that gets a very interesting perspective that, it's entirely possible that this universe is surrounded by an infinite energy, but it can't actually exist in this space because it would violate its very principle. In that same sense, it's kind of like if a part of that infinite energy wanted to come into this universe, it would have to turn itself into a finite source. It would have to devalue itself and deform itself and become something it isn't, even though it's not part of us, but it still has a connection to us. And of course, what they go on to say is that what happens when you die is presumably, and they say, everyone says this, is that you end up, your energy ends up rejoining and ceases to be a hologram or illusion, and it rejoins that infinite energy, and you retain, possibly you retain your sense of identity and self and the things you learned in that life. But you return to the infinite. But it's so interesting that the infinite cannot interfere with the finite. It can only send itself in a lesser form into the finite world, because in an infinite world, nothing changes. it's all the same. It's like you can't move because you have limitless energy. And if you have infinite energy, that means you don't move because you're moving everywhere at once. So you can't exist in a finite space. So if someone found an infinite power source, the whole point of change and struggle and acceptance and the struggle through life doesn't occur, and it doesn't happen unless it exists in a subpar form. Once you achieve perfection, there's no point to do the journey because you've reached the destination. Like, that's a scientific idea that completely encompasses the spiritual, that like they are uniform in that sense. And their theory about cosmic resonance is, there's this one concept about, the background radiation of the universe, that, you look at the light emanating from dying stars or newly born stars, and they have certain radiation and signals and waves and whatever, and there's certain parts of the universe where they scan it and there's a lot of it, and they scan it and there's not a lot of it. Or there's radiation that is, I forgot, there's like redshift and blue shift, and redshift is emanating while blue shift is absorbing, something like that. But they can basically figure out, how far the universe is expanding. Apparently the expanding is like slowing down. And so they literally talk about the north, south, east, and west of the universe, at least in this paper. And they say that, it's interesting, they said that the north is expanding the fastest, the south is expanding slower, while the east and west are kind of like just barren or something. And so, as I understand it, they're kind of saying that the shape of the universe is like a giant cosmic egg. And their idea, which I just think is so interesting, is that when the universe was created as a Big Bang theory, it's kind of like at the top of the universe was a white hole, and at the bottom of it was a black hole. And it's kind of like we're drifting towards that in this giant cycle or something. And the idea is that as the universe goes into the black hole, it's reborn into the white hole and this infinite cycle of energy, which is surrounded by the infinite. And they added a new layer of complexity over that, where they talk about the holographic dimension, or that we're a reflection of something else. So it's the idea that there is another universe also going through this process. And they talk about the Taurus, and it's not the Taurus constellation of a bull or anything, but apparently the Taurus in here is actually like a spiral, basically. And it's kind of like these two universes are, in concordance, or like a reflection of each other, and they interact with each other on the quantum level, and they're kind of intertwined in a way. That's the most I remember from that part. Yeah, so I think that was the extent of the cosmic whatever on that point. And the idea that once you can transcend, you can actually visit these places. I will say something that's very interesting is that they only mention it once or twice here, but they do say once you go into like astral projection, that you will and can communicate with other beings. And, it's just like, this is a scientific paper, and it's like, yep, there are other beings that are just there. And it categorizes them into two groups, the higher frequency beings and the lower frequency beings. And they kind of say that the lower ones are not good to interact with. And that's pretty much the extent of what they say on that. And yeah, they have some illustrations in here about the left and right hemisphere of the brain and their functions. It talks about this one expression called clicking out. So again, this definitely relates to Hermetic philosophy, but it's kind of like our lives are in a state of oscillation. I think the Hermetic principle for this one is called it might be correspondence, but it's basically like our lives are in this state of oscillation, our moods, our energies, and so on. And so we have the high highs and the low lows, and in like a sine wave. And they're basically saying that when you're at the highest point or at the lowest point, when it's doing that correction, it's like your consciousness, or your energy rather, your energy as consciousness is at rest. And it's saying that when we are correcting our energies through our natural cycles, that this is the point where you have the opportunity to click out. And it describes this as when you do the transcendental meditation during this time frame, or during this point in time when you are correcting your energy, you have the opportunity or the ability for your astral projection to go beyond your energy level, that you can go to higher dimensions or different dimensions, or you can just go somewhere that you are not supposed to be. And this is apparently when you have the best chance to have the best out-of-body experience, to have the best kind of fully awake, lucid dream, REM sleep. I mean, when you have your REM sleep and you're lucid dreaming, that's probably when you're doing your energy thing. But if you're also doing the meditation during this time, then that's also the opportunity for you to basically, apparently, just go beyond and be able to interact with these, I guess, other places or other beings or something. And they call it clicking out, which is a really good expression. I like that. And so, yeah, they have an image of it right there, actually. So they have, they're going in a sine wave, and then when you reach the top or the bottom, you can end up just going out. And what they call the infinite zone, which is surrounding our universe, they also call it the absolute, which also makes me think of like the Indian or Hindu idea of the Atman, which is like you have like yourself, your soul self, your spirit self, and then like your God super self. Like this is like the ultimate version of yourself, which is called the Atman, which is like the uber self, basically. And so this is interesting what they say about the energy in different dimensions, is that a certain space can be covered by energy moving in either particle or wave form in a certain time, assuming a specific velocity virtually anywhere in this time-space universe. The relationship is neat and predictable. However, in the intermediate dimensions beyond time-space, the limitations imposed on energy to put it into a state of oscillating motion are not uniform, as they are in our physical universe. A myriad of various distortions and incongruities are thus likely to be encountered, such that our nice, neat assumptions concerning the relationship between time and space as we know it in this dimension do not apply. But even more important, access is open to both the past and the future when the dimension of current time-space is left behind. So yeah, I forgot to talk about this. So they also went into time travel or time observance. And they're kind of like at the first stage, which is like level 10 or something. It's like there's level 10, which is just normal meditation. Level 12 is, you can get outside, outside your body and transcend. Level 15 is going to the past, observing things in the past, while level 12 is like observing things in the present. And apparently level 21, which is the hardest one, is perceiving things in the future. And that's very hard. And actually that reminds me of things where, apparently CERN or whatever is like, they have these quantum computers now that are trying to like predict certain outcomes or increase the probabilities of certain outcomes happening. That's like a secret, evil, cabal elite thing that they've been trying to do. And apparently it doesn't work, or it's not working for them the way they want to. But yeah, I think that is like a science thing that people are like at the top levels. They're trying to use quantum computing to change probabilities for the future that they want, or we want. Probably what they want, not what we want, but whatever. But they are saying the other point in that is the reason people might go to these other dimensions and they don't remember anything is because it's just like a dream, or it's like REM sleep. Like, it's very hard to remember those dreams. And what's interesting, really interesting, what they go into here is that the only way to reliably remember something is not through words or thoughts, but the best way to remember something about a dream is through symbols. And that is literally what Carl Jung said, that he was obsessed with dreams and symbolism because the symbols in the dreams had all the meaning, or he looked for the meaning of the symbols in the dream. Sometimes his patients come to me, it's like, sorry, I have no idea what this means. Maybe it's just gibberish, maybe it's nonsense, maybe it's nothing, or maybe something very, very intuitive. I think there was some dream about like some little girl who dreamed she was a monster, but she was a very sick, physically little girl. She had like tuberculosis or something. She passed away, very sad, but you know, and then sometimes you'd have dreams about a guy who saw a snake. Sometimes people have had dreams that are literally out of the Bible about like people like, you know, seeing like a narrow passage and, you know, all their friends are there and they can't go through it because and it turns out they're of a different religion, and that passage is literally about the eye of the camel, or the eye of the needle and the camel passing through it, or it's a coincidence. But it's the symbols in the dreams that seem to be able to communicate the meaning, or it's what people definitely remember from their dreams that have the meaning and the message and what they want to keep. And if going off to other, you know, dimensions and getting these ideas and thoughts, whatever, the best way to retain something is through a symbol. And every religion is just filled with nothing but symbols. And also, one of the most ancient civilizations on the planet communicated exclusively through symbols, which is the Egyptian hieroglyphics. So were they dream interpreters? I mean, actually, one of the classic biblical roles of every prophet, especially, I don't want to get his name wrong, Joseph, I think. Every single prophet in the Bible, their main thing is interpreting symbols and dreams, and symbols in dreams, and thematic gestures. There's one where I think one of the kings of Israel smites the ground 3 times before God to show how much damage will be done to them. And the prophet says it would be better if you would smote it 6 times or something. But yeah, it's like these symbols correlate with meaning, and it seems like at the highest levels, possibly aliens would communicate through symbols, and that's why we have Egyptians and hieroglyphics, and that's why the pyramids are there. I don't know. I don't know. But it sounds like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. That sounds legit. And in a way, like, letters are symbols too. So if you wrote it out, maybe you'd be able to remember it. But sometimes if you had a symbol that just represented what you were talking about, that might be easier. I don't know. Oh yeah, and this is interesting. The way they talk about the technique for getting out of your body, which is like level 15, is literally like climbing a telephone pole or like a ladder that you want to climb out of your body and then you can observe it, which is, I don't know, I just thought that was funny that there's like a certain technique to it. Or it's like crawling out of bed like front ways. And the Taurus Big Bang. Oh yeah, and so there is the Taurus that they were talking about in the Big Bang universe theory. So they see the intertwining spirals here, and those two basically are like the reflected universes and the holograms together. I'm still not actually fully sure if our universe is a hologram and a reflection of another universe, or a reflection of the infiniteness around our universe. That's something I'm just actually not clear on, actually, to be fully honest with you guys. And they talked about quasars for a little bit, but I didn't really get what that had to do with the rest of this. And they say that, you know, the absolute, the infinite out there also has a consciousness. Yeah, and it says it does, and it does say, like, you know, this kind of stuff does take a lot of practice, a lot of meditation. You have to use the tapes constantly. It says if you actually want, and I'm sorry, maybe I might have misread this, but if you actually want a full out-of-body experience and be fully conscious, they say there's like a specific tape just for that is at a very specific frequency. And they say of their class over the course of a week, which really isn't that long, only 5% of students actually achieve that state with that specific tape. So they say it's possible, but it does take a lot of practice to do that. So here's a bit more realistic, practical effects. So how do we start? We start with self-hypnosis, and teaching the individual participant to isolate extraneous concerns in a visualization device called an energy conversion box. I'd call it an anxiety box, frankly. But next, the participant is introduced to a method of encouraging his mind and body to strive to achieve a state of resonance through utterance of a single tone, a monotonous, protracted humming sound that sets up a feeling of vibration, particularly in the head. He engages in this resonant tuning, as it is called, by humming along with a chorus of such sounds that are contained on the gateway tape. Following this, the participant is exposed to the gateway affirmation and is encouraged to repeat it to himself as he hears it repeated on the tape. The affirmation is the statement that the individual realizes he is more than merely physical and that he deeply desires to expand his consciousness. After that, hemisync frequencies are introduced on the tape. And they call it a mixture of pink and white noise. I know what white noise is. I have no idea what pink noise is. Designed to put the physical body at the virtual threshold of sleep, as well as to calm the left hemisphere of the mind while raising the right hemisphere to a state of heightened attentiveness. Once all of this is achieved, the participant is invited to envisage creation of an energy balloon comprised of an energy flow beginning at the center of the top of the head and extending down in all directions to the feet. The energy involved in this flow then proceeds up through the body and back into the balloon pattern again. The energy balloon, which sets up a pattern very reminiscent of the cosmic edge discussed earlier, not only enhances bodily energy flow and encourages early achievement of suitable resonant state, but is also designed to provide protection against conscious entities possessing lower energy levels, which the participant might encounter in the event he achieves an out-of-body state. It serves as a precautionary purpose in the unlikely event that the participant's first out-of-body experience involves direct projection outside the terrestrial sphere. So, I mean, there it is. There's how to do it. I'm sure the tapes have a certain frequency and everything, but there's a scientific method that's been used to achieve this type of meditation and spiritual enlightenment. And you just heard it. In other words, the technique of patterning recognizes the fact that since consciousness is the source of all reality, our thoughts have the power to influence the development of reality in time-space as it applies to us if those thoughts can be projected with adequate intensity. However, the more complicated the objective sought and the more radically it departs from our current reality, the more time the universal hologram will need to reorient our reality sphere to accommodate our desires. Monroe trainers caution against attempting to force the pace of this process because the individual could succeed in dislocating his existing reality with drastic consequences. So basically, you can manifest certain probabilities to increase their odds, like, I don't know, finding a dollar bill on the street, getting someone's contact information. But if it's something that's too extreme, don't ask for the moon, because in the best case, it just won't work. And the worst case, it does work and you don't really exist anymore. Oh yeah, and then it talks about, just at the end here, it's really funny. They talk about energy bar tools. And they're basically talking, what's an energy bar? They're talking about magic wands. And they're saying in every civilization, there has always been an instrument from a wizard with a wand to a king's scepter, that these instruments essentially emulate an experience that they describe as, I'll just read it for you. Yeah. The energy bar tool technique involves envisaging a small, intensely pulsating dot of light, which the participant charges in his imagination with enormous energy until it is virtually pulsating. The participant then extrudes the dot into the shape of a sparkling, vibrating cylinder of energy, which he then uses to channel force from the universe to selected parts of his body for purposes of healing and revitalization. So that's in the sense of healing. I don't know if you could be used to attack someone, which you usually see in Harry Potter and stuff, but there it is, or the Force or something. Yes, they say for remote viewing, you want to use or symbolize or imagine a vortex or portal so that you can actually exit your body or your space. I'm just going to read the one on traveling to the past just because it's interesting. All of the preceding techniques are conducted at the level of expanded awareness known as Focus 12. However, the technique of time travel into the past involves further expansion of consciousness through the inclusion of additional levels of sound on the hemisync tapes. Some of the sound is probably merely an intensification of the basic hemisync frequencies, being designed to further modify brainwave frequency and amplitude. Other aspects of the added sound patterns appear to be designed to provide subtle, almost subliminal suggestions to the mind as to what is desired by way of further expanded consciousness so as to support the verbal suggestions and instructions also contained on the tape. Even the instructions are highly symbolic, with time being visualized as a huge wheel in the universe with various spokes, each of which give access to a different part of the participant's past. Focus 15 is a very advanced state and is extremely difficult to achieve. Probably less than 5% of all participants in any given gateway experience actually fully achieve the Focus 15 state during the course of the approximately 7 days of training. Nonetheless, Monroe Institute trainers affirm that with enough practice, eventually Focus 15 can be achieved. They also state that not only the individual's past history is available for examination by one who has achieved Focus 15, but other aspects of the past with which the individual himself had no connection may also be accessed. That's really cool. So not only can you go back into your past, but into the general past. And it says, for future observation, you basically need a super, super high level, and it'll take, a period of months, if not years, to actually do that with the tape's help. And talk about out-of-body movement. Here's something. The particular hemisync tape concerned with that technique employs beta signals of around 2,877.3 CPS or cycles per second. 30 to 40 CPS is considered to be the normal range for beta brainwave signals, those associated with the wakeful state. So you're going way high if you wanna try to do out of body movement. The Monroe Institute did numerous experiments involving persons moving from coast to coast and out of the body state to read a series of 10 computer-generated numbers in a university laboratory. Although most acquired enough of the digits to make clear that their consciousness was present, none have ever succeeded in getting all 10 correct. So there you go. There is a caveat. And they kind of say here that, the universe is really movement, not objects in motion, but just all motion, because everything is energy, everything is in motion. And so basically you either have the infinite and the absolute, which is stationary because it is infinite and everywhere at once, and then you have the finite, which is in motion and in change, and everything is energy, matter is energy, everything is energy. There's a sound rational basis in terms of physical science parameters for considering Gateway to be plausible in terms of its essential objectives. Intuitional insights of not only personal but of practical and professional nature would seem to be within bounds of reasonable expectations. However, a phased approach for entering the gateway experience in an accelerated mode would seem to be required if the time needed to reach advanced states of altered consciousness is to be brought within more manageable limits from the standpoint of establishing an organization-wide exploration of Gateway's potential. The most promising approach suggested in the foregoing study involves the following steps. It says, use the hemisphere tapes, REM sleep, etc. Repeat the first 2 steps, use auto-hypnotic suggestion, etc. And if you really want to read all this, you can, because it's free online, and I'll probably put it in the description. Yeah, and it says that's the system. So there is the crazy practical world of spiritual astral projection and its qualities. Anyway, who can say that all that universe and cosmic, resonance stuff is real? Maybe I think I might try some more meditation now. Not that I was doing it really before, but yeah, there it is. Very, very interesting stuff. Even if it's not super reliable, there's lots. This has been around for centuries, and if there is some credence to give any of that meditative stuff purpose or praise, I think this has done it. But yeah, always be curious, always be exploring, and always keep reading. All right, see you guys later. Bye.